This storm is a mammoth storm. It has caused untold damage and suffering.
The entire country has been decimated. I have never seen anything like this before.
Massive gusts, guys.
And another storm is on the way. We want Britain to do everything in its power to assist us, and assist us now.
The eye of Irma early in the week. Satellites had been tracking its progress since it formed at the end of August as it gathered strength and swelled in size in the Atlantic. It's mid-hurricane season. Harvey had already dumped months of rainfall in a few hours on Texas. Houston was submerged. Surely nothing could be worse than this. But Harvey was a Category 4 hurricane. On Tuesday, Irma was upgraded to the maximum Category 5 status. A hurricane hunter plane from America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flew through it. It recorded sustained winds of more than 185 miles per hour. Viewed from the International Space Station, it soon became clear it wasn't just the biggest storm of the year, but one of the biggest ever. Florida had several days to plan for the worst, and for hundreds of thousands of people that meant getting out of the danger zone. But for most people living on small islands further east in the Caribbean, there could be no escape. Take shelter and hope for the best was the only option. Barbuda is one of the smaller and lesser known of the crescent-shaped Leeward Islands, just to the north of its larger neighbour Antigua. It was the first to feel the full force of Irma.
We just did a flyover, and I have to tell you, my heart sunk. And this has been one of the worst days of my life. So I know how you must feel as Barbudans. The entire country has been decimated. I have never seen anything like this before.
Around 2,000 people live here. 90% of homes were damaged. Half of them are no longer habitable.
You had a situation where containers, 40-foot containers, were actually lifted up to about 100 yards from where they were originally located. I mean, the island and perhaps the Caribbean has never experienced anything like this.
A 2-year-old child was killed as her family fled their battered home during the height of the storm.
The jag, you have to jag me, jag my son. Nah, let go, can't find my son and my old friend. This is the worst. Me when they call this a hurricane. A hurricane to do something like this. Me never, for my life, me never see a wall house crumble and the hurricane. But in this situation, you see wall house crumble down to nothing.
And now Barbuda faces another battering. Hurricane Jose is heading this way. As Irma pushed westwards, the French territories of St. Bart's and Saint Martin were next in its sights, as well as the British overseas territory of Anguilla. The island of St. Martin is divided between Dutch and French administration. Soon after Irma departed, a Dutch military helicopter was able to provide aerial views of the devastation it had left behind. There were fatalities on both sides of the island. Almost all homes were damaged, there is no power and no running water. A state of emergency has been declared. The Dutch and French governments quickly mobilized troops to deploy to the affected islands. But the British government appeared to react more slowly. A minister talked of sending experts to help. Anguilla relies on Britain for defence and security.
Massive gusts, guys.
Islanders were unimpressed.
To tell us that you're sending us experts without a time frame, and in the context where everyone knew in advance that this was going to be the largest storm ever recorded in history of the Atlantic, is so unacceptable that it's really appalling.
The Royal Fleet auxiliary ship Mounts Bay was diverted to the area, but more was needed. The government defended its response.
Our immediate concern is ensuring the support is there and every effort is being made as these hurricanes are devastating these islands. But at the Cobra today, I also ensured that a piece of work was being put in place, already started, on long-term planning. What will be the reconstruction needs for these islands in the future? What support will they need and what can we give?
Engineers restored power to Anguilla's only hospital and reinforced shelters in preparation for Hurricane Jose. 6 tons of emergency aid was also unloaded. 24 hours later, transport planes at RAF Bryce Norton were being loaded with supplies and personnel.
We're going to have aid from DFID, shelters, medics, medical supplies. We have about 200 Royal Marines who are turning up. We have engineers. So we have all the basics of essential support that will allow us to get that into the region as quickly as possible and then deliver it to where it's most needed.
This is where some of it is headed. The British Virgin Islands are to the north of their American-run neighbours and were more directly in the path of the storm. Officials there had to broadcast emergency radio messages to the population.
People of the British Virgin Islands, this is Governor Gus Jasper. I come to you with a heavy heart after experiencing and observing the extent of devastation caused by Hurricane Irma. After consultation with the Premier, I have declared a state of emergency for the territory. All of us have been affected by Irma, and some more than others. Apart from the structural damage, there have sadly been reports of casualties and fatalities. I am truly heartbroken by this news.
The loss of power and communications doesn't just terrify those who've endured the storm. Relatives and friends of expats and tourists fear the worst if they cannot contact their loved ones. They're probably safe and well, but until telephone lines and mobile signals are restored, no one knows for sure. The larger islands in the region, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic and Haiti, were all lashed by rain and wind, but avoided the kind of catastrophic damage seen elsewhere. These nations have regularly endured destructive hurricanes throughout history, but the leaders of some Caribbean nations are blaming climate change for making it worse.
We are clearly suffering from the effects of climate change, and that is an issue that we have to agitate to ensure that there is less pollution, less profligacy in pollutions by larger countries, understanding that smaller countries in the Caribbean and SIDS in the Pacific, that we are literally suffering the consequences of climate change.
Whatever the cause, the trend over the past 20 years has seen hurricanes become more intense and powerful. And if that continues, there will be worse to come in the future.
Obviously, you can't just attribute one storm to global warming, but a warmer sea does certainly contribute to a more powerful storm. We haven't done the research yet on Harvey last week, or indeed Irma yet, and you can't actually attribute it to global warming. But one thing that global warming does mean is that we will see warmer seas, and you need the sea surface temperatures to be over a certain amount. So there are suggestions that a warmer atmosphere will make more severe storms.
As Irma continues its week-long journey across the Caribbean, the Bahamas is the latest nation to be hit. Shops in the capital Nassau were boarded up in preparation, and some more remote low-lying islands have been evacuated because of the risk of being swamped by the storm's surge. But Irma did weaken. It was downgraded to a Category 4, but it remains an extremely destructive storm, and it's on its way to Florida.
Hurricane Irma continues to be a threat that is going to devastate the United States and either Florida or some of the southeastern states. This is a complex forecast. Anybody from Alabama to North Carolina should be watching this storm very closely. The forecast and the direct impacts of this storm have yet to be determined because, one, it's a very powerful storm. But the nature of the curve in that forecast after 72 hours is going to be the key to see who gets the worst impacts here. It's not a question of if Florida is going to be impacted, it's a question of how bad Florida is going to be impacted.
Which means that Irma will land right at the front door of the president. Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence is closed and shuttered. The president will be in Washington, well away from the storm, but closely monitoring a hurricane which has already affected tens of millions of people and will be felt by many more in the coming days.
This is a storm of absolutely historic destructive potential. I ask everyone in the storm's path to be vigilant and to heed all recommendations from government officials and law enforcement.